I have just come out of the courthouse here at Delphi, and I've got to tell you, it's nothing like you would ever imagine. Richard Allen comes in the room, assesses the entire situation, flanked by his lawyers, and then in comes the jury. In the last hours, I have heard testimony that I believe will render a verdict one way or the other. I'm Nancy Grace. This is Crime Stories. Thank you for being with us.
To the killer who may be in this room, we believe you are hiding in plain sight. You never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know, and one day you will.
While Abby Williams' blood is in one spot of the crime scene, Major Pat Cicero says Libby German's blood is found in multiple spots of the crime scene. Cicero says Libby was likely attacked close by, but at one point was actually moving and basically walking in blood. Based on a large amount of Libby's blood being found in one spot, it is determined that Libby bled to death a short distance away from where she was first attacked. Also, after Libby was dead, her body was later dragged a short distance and placed close to a large tree.
These are some of the facts that the jury has already heard about the way these girls' bodies were found. But I can tell you from being in the courtroom, it gets much worse. In the last hours, we have heard testimony from a psychologist who saw Richard Allen practically every day behind bars. I heard her describe, and I saw Richard Allen's jaw just working. The worse it got, the worse it got. I am telling you, I would stake everything that I have ever done in court, everything I know about the law on this. Richard Allen is not insane. He did not have a psychotic break. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he is playing everybody. Will that include the jury? I watch this guy nudge his lawyer, say something, and they give him mints. He asks for water. He asks for a writing pad. He takes notes. He flips the page. He looks around. He looks back at a group of YouTubers who are very pro-defense, who have been publishing horrible things about the victims' families online. I would be very surprised if they don't get sued. These people that are trashing the victims' families, suggesting that they had something to do with the murders. Yeah, think about Burt Ramsey before you keep doing that, you YouTubers, blaming the victims' families. But that said, let me get back to the evidence. Joining me an all-star panel, but first, I want to go straight out to investigative reporter Susan Hendricks, author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. Okay, it all started off this morning with the first witness on the stand. Her name, Dr. Walla. And she describes multiple confessions the defendant gave. And the prosecutor, a female prosecutor, is very careful to ask, lead up to it. In fact, I thought I was going to jump out of my seat with all the lead up, but now I understand why. How was he acting? What was his demeanor? What else was he saying? And I want to reiterate this. After this guy would give a confession to murdering Abby and Libby, claiming he wanted to them, but he saw some guy and he backed off, that's why he took them down there. After he would tell the psychologist this while he was incarcerated, he would then go, look, I'm not getting enough water. I want my property back. I want a tablet. I want to talk to my wife. I want to change jails. He knew exactly what he was saying. Those confessions were just like, hey, can I have that bottle of water, please? Can you hand me that, Susan Hendricks? He is just as sane as everybody sitting up in Congress right now. Susan Hendricks, can we go straight to the first confession she outlined in court? And I got to tell you, I'm looking at the jury, Susan Hendricks, and I can already see alliances. And I can venture to guess who's going to vote which way, but I don't know enough yet. Susan, let's talk about the confession. Hit me.
Yeah, I mean, it was riveting inside, and we've been dying to hear from Richard Allen himself, and he is manipulative. And he would just say nonchalantly, I killed Abby and Libby, but I'm a coward. I won't kill myself. And it went on and on and on. But you're right. We talked about following them on the bridge, leading them down the hill. in his own words, I looked over at Abby and Libby's families and tears. It was a long time coming that they finally heard from him.
Well, what was so amazing to me, Susan Hendricks, is how he could shift gears. He was completely nonplussed. He would say, I killed Abby and Libby. You know, my wife doesn't believe me. At one juncture, hey, let's go straight out to Cheryl McCollum joining us, who has been on the case from the very beginning, founder, director of the Cold Case Research Institute, and forensic expert. Cheryl, I just wish you had seen this in court today. One thing, the prosecutor knew the psychologist records better than she did. She was having to flip through pages throughout. The prosecutor would have to direct her to a certain document and a certain paragraph in the document to get her to understand what the question was. That can work both ways, Cheryl. Number one, she can look unprepared, but number two, she clearly does not have a dog in the fight. She's not trying to convict this guy, or she would have the answers at the tip of her tongue, right? So it was amazing to me, Cheryl McCollum, that Alan would be saying, I killed Abby and Libby. I wanted to them, but this goes back to what you were telling me the other day, but I was interrupted. I thought I saw a guy, so I backed off. Then, within a matter of minutes, he'll start saying, I'm worried I'm not going to get enough water behind bars. I want to change facilities. I want to be closer to my family. I mean, he's clearly totally sane, Cheryl.
Nancy, they had 9 correction officers testify when I was there that he would wait and watch them and would then do things when he knew they were looking at him, like that's when he would drink the toilet water. They felt like he was doing that deliberately to make them believe he was insane, but none of them thought he was.
Okay, I've got a theory. Everybody, let's go to Philip Dubé, high-profile lawyer joining us out of LA in the Public Defender's Office, which means he tries a lot of cases. Philip, this is what I think is happening, and you help me figure out a way to shoot it down, all right? I think they are going to argue, the defense is going to argue that, of course, Richard Allen degenerated behind bars and that he was out of his mind from being in solitary when he gave those confessions. I think the state is laying a foundation right now, Philip, to show that he was confessing until he started confessing to his wife, and she said, shut the H up, stop saying that. And she called his lawyers. Then he meets with his lawyers, and then suddenly, Philip, he starts eating paper, smearing feces, drinking toilet water. He had done nothing of that up until the time he tells his wife, I did it. And she calls in the lawyers, and then he starts acting crazy, Philip Dubé. You see what I'm saying here? He was giving confessions. His wife told the lawyers, and then suddenly, amazingly, he has a psychotic break. Are you with me, Dubé?
Of course. So if I were defending him, this is how I would tackle it. The test for the voluntariness of confessions is not psychosis or insanity. It's whether or not the conditions were so treacherous and so dreadful that you would cop to anything to change your conditions and surroundings. And by copping out to crimes, in his mind, he thought that they would improve the conditions, give him better food, give him a better cell, and not cut him off from the outside world. And that is the whole theory behind involuntary confessions. You'll cop to anything. Yes.
How can you reconcile the two things that you just said? You said that they're going to argue the conditions in solitary were so horrible that he had a psychotic break. But yet you also said he's angling to get better food, go to a better prison, get more water, get more visits. How can you be crazy and yet you're angling to get better treatment? I mean, well, that's not crazy. Point. That's crazy like a fox, Dubé.
No. What you're doing is you're trying to let everybody know that your situation is wreaking havoc on the human psyche due to either under or malnourishment. And he's losing his mind, frankly, but not to the point of psychosis or insanity, but to get people to listen to him and feed him properly, give him something to drink, talk to him like a normal person, and take him out of those torturous type conditions so that he can take agency over his life without being non-compos mentis, because I truly believe that the malnourishment and the undernourishment was taking an emotional and a mental toll on him, to the point that he would
Okay,
say anything
Philip,
to get the guards'
Philip,
attention.
Philip, what undernourishment? He says, I want more bottled waters. They give it to him. He eats all of his food. What undernourishment are you even talking about? Are you just spinning this out like Rumpelstiltskin? Well, what are you talking about?
No. Don't you remember, the man was wasting away to nothing? He was emaciated. There was nothing left
Yeah,
to
because
him.
he doesn't want to look
Yeah.
like the bridge guy. They're giving him
No.
food. He's changing his appearance. Do you think Ted
Oh, please.
Bundy wasn't given food? No, he
Come
changed his appearance and
on.
lost weight so he could escape from a heat vent. No, you come on. I'm talking about the
You're
truth.
making it
I'm
sound
talking
like,
about what I
I
just
know.
saw in court.
I know, but you're making it sound like they were
What?
giving him a smorgasbord every day and he can eat to his heart's content. They were
And you're
giving him
making it sound
gruel
like they
and
were
porridge.
starving him.
Pretty much.
Okay, you know
Yeah.
what? I can see where this is going. Let me understand. Your theory is he starved himself into a psychotic break. I don't know that that's possible, but maybe in Philip Dubé world it is. Let's go through, regardless of what Dubé is advancing right now. Susan Hendricks, I want to go back to what we learned in court today. I want to go to, if I can wade through all of my notes, let me get back to page 7 of my notes. He said he wanted closure, that he wanted to sign his confession, that he wanted to apologize to his family, and that he was trying to forgive himself. At this point, he was, quote, not disorganized. He had a coherent speech and appearance. He did not cry. He stated that he took the girls down to them, that he was interrupted. He saw a guy or heard a guy. He stated that he covered their bodies up with twigs and he said branches. He covered their bodies with branches. He said, I didn't do all the things I've said I've done, but I did kill Abby and Libby, but my wife won't believe me. He wanted to know if his family would, quote, keep loving him. In fact, he asked a psychologist to get him a phone. She did get him a phone. He spoke to his wife. When she came back into the room, the psychologist, he wanted to recall the wife. And he went, no, I want you to stay in here. I want you to hear it. And he continued to confess. Susan, relay to everyone what we've just heard in court.
Yes, and hearing Dr. Walla on the stand, Nancy, as you said, and saying at one point that he molested his sister, another time, as you mentioned, saying he was interrupted. And that could either be Libby's dad, who was set there to pick her up around 3:30. Was he calling her name? Did that interrupt Richard Allen? But finally admitting to this. And yesterday, he looked very different. We saw the October 2022 video, the first interview, when he seemed like a normal guy, that nothing was wrong. Now he's meek, putting his head down, glaring back at his wife. You're absolutely right. These are key to this case. I believe that he's not insane, that the high security prison did not cause him to become insane. I believe he's manipulative, and did kill Abby and Libby, from his own words.
Susan Hendricks, you kind of glossed over a big bombshell in the courtroom. He said that his words to the effect that his problem, that's what he called it. I was calling it attraction to underage girls. But his problem all started when he molested his sister. That's what he just said in court. Did you hear that?
I heard that, and I wrote it down, and he said molesting his sister, that molesting kids his own age when he was younger. And Nancy, I know you remember this, when he said he thought Abby and Libby were older. This is after the fact, after he killed them. It dawned on him, oh, I thought they were older.
What is your last memory?
She was standing at the door with this smile that she has, and I said, it could be a little chilly out there, you get a jacket. She just looked at me and smiled and said, I'll be okay, it's okay, Grandma. That's my last memory.
Dropping her off at their house with her paints. That is the last visual I have of my little girl. It's on that bridge.
Explaining how Libby's blood ended up on a small tree about 4 feet from the ground, Major Cicero says it's likely a blood transfer as the result of coming in contact with the bloody body of Libby German. Cicero believes at least one of her neck injuries happened near the small tree. Cicero also believes Libby left a bloody handprint shaped like an upside-down L on one of the trees.
Welcome back. We are camped outside the Delphi courthouse and have just come out of the courtroom bringing you the very latest. And I will guarantee you, whether the jury hears it or not from the experts, Richard Allen is not crazy. Richard Allen did not have a psychotic break behind bars. He is playing everybody like a fiddle. Joining me right now is Jeffrey Gentry, forensic certified bloodstain pattern analyst, senior crime scene analyst and death investigator, former toxicology lab analyst. It goes on and on, but listen to this. Author of Forensic Science, Applications to Death and Crime Scene Investigations, and many more. Jeffrey Gentry, thank you so much for being with us. Jeff, I want you to hear this. Listen.
The crime scene has multiple areas of blood that are almost all from Libby German. And in an area away from where the bodies of Libby and Abby are found is a big pool of blood near a tree. This is the spot where Libby's throat is slit and where she most likely grabs at her neck as a reflex action to try and slow the bleeding. It is in this spot where Libby German slumps against a tree, unable to stop the bleeding, accounting for the vast amount of blood on her hands before coming to a seated position near where the largest pool of coagulating blood is found.
Jeffrey Gentry, could you explain what we just heard? How you can tell what happened by the blood analysis?
Yes, Nancy. I'm really happy that the prosecution used a blood pattern analyst because that's what blood pattern analysis is for. It's for explaining unwitnessed events when there's blood at a scene. And if you have blood, it's going to explain events that occurred. And in this case, it was obviously a lot of blood. These poor little girls suffered quite a bit. And in this case, the young lady that was found, that was taken from one location to another, there were blood transfers on a tree. And they were up high enough that would indicate that she was upright at some point during
Jeff
this attack.
Gentry, could you just hold on just one moment? I'm drinking from the fire hydrant here. You're giving me so much information. Could you repeat the starting 2 sentences ago about how the blood transfer got on the tree and what that means to you in combination with the highly saturated earth, saturated with blood?
Yes. So this young lady sustained neck injuries or major wounds that are going to bleed a lot, and they're going to bleed very fast. And almost always as a reaction to these type of injuries, a victim is going to touch the wound. And so by touching that wound, they're going to transfer blood to their hand or their arms. And in an effort to either fight off their attacker or just to survive themselves, they're going to touch other objects. And so that's exactly what happened in this case. There were blood transfer stains that were high enough up on a tree that would indicate that she was in a standing position. So she's touched this wound. She knows she's injured. And then she's transferring her own blood to this tree, either by her fingers or hand or body parts that are bloody. But then at some point, you're going to start to suffer the effects of blood loss. And so there was evidence that she bled significantly near that tree. So you have blood that's accumulated on the ground. It would normally, like if you had it in a living room or on a tile floor, you'd see a giant blood pool. But in this case, it's out in the open. It's on dirt or branches. And so you see that there is evidence of a large volume of blood there that starts to obviously coagulate and dry. So that's how we know that not only was she injured when she was standing, but then she's essentially fighting off or trying to get away from her attacker. She touches the tree while standing. And then as she sustains the effects of blood loss, she then likely collapses in that area, allowing blood to accumulate on the ground near the tree. And again, that's what blood pattern analysis is all about. It's there to explain events that are unwitnessed when there's bleeding that has occurred.
Take a listen to this, Jeff.
The large pool of blood near the base of the small tree is most likely the spot where Libby dies. She's then dragged to the location where her body will be found the next day. Major Pat Cicero says the streaks of blood that run from Libby's right eye to her ear were textbook consistent with dilution, pointing out how they get lighter and lighter and describing it as absent raindrop or water. He says the source of the thinning was a tear. Sniffles are heard through the courtroom, and it's at this point that Carrie Timmons, Liberty German's mother, breaks down.
All along, the victims' parents, grandparents, have hoped and prayed that the girls died quickly. When the evidence of the blood mingled with the girls' tears came out in court, the family couldn't take it. It's horrible. To Jeff Gentry, if you could analyze what you are hearing, number one, that based on the blood evidence alone, the detectives know that at least one of the girls was dragged to where she was found. And number two, how do you determine that a tear going down the side of the face was mixed with or diluted with, a tear was diluted with blood?
Okay, I'll tackle those in the order you gave them to me. So the body being transferred from one location to another, just like the blood that was transferred to a tree, you'll see evidence of blood transfer on the ground. When somebody's bleeding, they're going to either continue to bleed, or if they've already died, they're going to have blood on their body. So you can see blood that has been transferred from one location to another. And just the mere fact that these injuries were so severe and that there was a large accumulation of blood near the tree, naturally you would assume that this young lady likely died near the tree, and then since her body was found in another location, that it was transferred from one spot to another. In addition to that, there will be blows or blood that has went from one location to another on the body. And so when the body is found in a position that contradicts those flow patterns, you can also tell that the body has been moved. And that was the case on her body. As far as the tears go, that's an amazing observation by the blood analyst. So I'm very proud that they found that, because it's hard to see those kind of things. And considering that he was going in after the fact and looking at photographs, it's difficult to see those type of things. But what you're looking at on the body, and when you bleed, the blood is going to dry on the body rather quickly. And if there's a diluting substance, you'll be able to see that. And in this case, it was near her eyes or her face that would indicate that the only fluid source available was tears. And so that'll dilute the blood. A picture, anytime you've ever bled, like if you've cut yourself shaving or you had a little cut on your hand and you bleed in the sink. Well, when you turn on the water, it's going to dilute the blood. And that's what it's going to look like. The question I believe that was brought up in court is, was this maybe condensation or environmental factors? And if it was an environmental factor or like condensation or rain, you would see the blood diluted uniformly throughout the entire body or all the blood stains on the body. Whereas in this case, they just saw that near the area of the eye or the face. And that would provide additional evidence that it was tears that diluted the blood as opposed to some other fluid or condensation.
The deaths of Libby German and Abby Williams have impacted the Delphi community and beyond. The crime scene photos and testimony have been hard to see and hear, but when Major Pat Cicero explains how blood that flowed down Libby's face bore the tracks of the teen's tears, it was almost too much to bear as her mother breaks down and weeps in the courtroom.
Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app, where you can get all of our content, where we, in our own way, seek justice.
The focus now of the defense is the timeline. Not what did they do, when did they do it, and who was around to see it, and what did they tell authorities?
The timeline is critical because she did not record just guys down the hill. We all know that. There's more.
While Libby German has blood on her body and hands, has multiple cuts to her throat, and walked in the blood, Abby Williams is much different. Major Pat Cicero says it is likely that Abby was laying down on her back when her throat was slit. When Abby is found, her hands are balled up like fists to her chest and tucked into the sweatshirt she is wearing that belongs to Libby. It is most likely that Abby died where she was attacked.
We are live here at the courthouse in Delphi and have just come out of the courtroom. We've all been waiting for that evidence that could clinch the case for the state or disprove the state's case. Because I've got to tell you, in light of the fact that there is no DNA linking the defendant, Richard Allen, to the crime scene, if all the state was relying on was a bullet that was cycled through, not shot down the barrel of a gun, which of course leaves a fingerprint marking that links one bullet to one particular gun. Without that, we had to hear the confessions, and in those confessions there had to be something that only the killer would know, and that just happened. Because I'm telling you, with no DNA, no eyewitness, and just the bullet found there, some of the jurors could not accept the science behind specific indentations and markings on a bullet that was never fired. Some juror may reject that. Just like jurors at one time didn't believe DNA or fingerprints. Yes, it happens. So we were waiting, and we just heard from the witness stand a psychologist that spent practically every day behind bars with Richard Allen. Joining me, investigative reporter Susan Hendricks, who actually wrote the book, Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. Susan, I want to refer you to one of the many confessions he gave. And he states that he had a gun. He states that he pointed the gun. He describes exactly what happens. He admits he was at the bridge at the time the murders occurred, in that time period, wearing the same clothes as the bridge guy. Now, could you explain, when he tells the jury that he had a gun and that he then covered the girls' bodies with branches, that information was not out there. That had not been released. Only the killer would have known all that.
Absolutely, and there goes the spin, Nancy. The defense trying to say the Odinism theory, and that sticks at the site happened to be put in a specific order near Abby's head, and that it meant something. Now we learned why he did it. Throwing sticks on, as the prosecution thought, and now we're hearing it from his own words. He followed them on the bridge, ordered them down a hill, had the gun, and that voice, down the hill, we've heard over and over again. We hear it from him finally, and you're absolutely right in terms of circumstantial evidence. We couldn't have just the bullet. Now we have his confessions. And again, there goes the Odinism theory that the judge didn't allow in.
One of his many confessions. Now, after he states on his own, sua sponte, that he had molested his sister, and that's where he thought his, quote, problems started, somehow almost blaming his sister, he then finds religion behind bars. He demands Bibles, which he gets. He wants more Bibles. He wants to share his Bible. He sleeps with his Bible. And during his religious phase, he confesses. He says he wants to apologize to the victim's family, and he wants closure by signing his confession. What about it, Susan Hendricks?
Giving the family a Bible, too. I looked over and I saw eyes rolling. I'd like to give this Bible to Abby and Libby's families. Look, they don't want it. They want their girls back, and you took their lives away at just age 13 and 14 years old. It's despicable, and I'm glad that the jurors are hearing it.
He actually said he regretted what he did. And the fact that he was asking for closure by signing the confession. Guys, in addition to Jeffrey Gentry, Cheryl McCollum, Philip Dubé, Susan Hendricks, joining me right now is a renowned medical examiner. He is the author of American Narcan, and he has devoted his life to helping others, specifically in bringing peace and closure on causes of death. Dr. William Maroney, my longtime colleague and friend. Dr. Maroney, I want to talk to you about some very odd cuts to the girls' necks. And Susan Hendricks, jump in, because I believe you heard the testimony as well. The throat slashings, Dr. Maroney, were not completely across the neck in at least one of the victims. There were multiple 4 to 5 vertical cuts on their necks. And the medical examiner is going to be tested, the medical examiner's report, as to whether the cuts were done with a box cutter as opposed to, say, a butcher knife. And also, I want your opinion on the blood evidence we're hearing about and those vertical cuts, because you don't normally hear of someone's throat getting slashed with vertical cuts. What does all of this mean to you, Dr. Maroney?
It's interesting to say that there's vertical and there's horizontal, because what you have to ask is which happened first. That's a big part of this. I want to bring in a prop and show you a neck. This is how we demonstrate this. The neck, when you look at vertical, those were probably done first, because anything going horizontal would have ended life instantly, and the loss of blood pressure would have caused a complete collapse, and the body would have gone down. Now, the reason why the vertical is important, this is a box cutter, is you don't have a big long blade. You have to go in this way and down. Now, the vertical cuts come first because somebody's reaching out to cut. The final cut would have been if there was somebody against a tree or on the ground, and it would have come this way. The order tells you that the victim did not die instantly, and that's what you get with the transfer of blood. When a victim tries to close a wound, they're pushing left or right together, but it's really hard. If you get that first cut this way, you lose posture, you lose blood pressure, and it's almost impossible to stop. So the order of the cuts are important. And if we go back to the consistency of the diluted blood with tears, if they do the analysis right, tears contain lipids, proteins, antibodies, and stress hormones. That in those samples that dry are going to show you that it wasn't rain and it wasn't moisture. So the order, the timing of how the cuts can be determined. That anything that's vertical really makes a lot more sense, as that's how it started. Plus, if somebody comes after you with a box knife and you lean back, you're losing contact coming this way. And that's how the person didn't die right away, and the victim probably suffered much more, because those verticals, especially if they were trying to defend themselves, were the first cuts, and the horizontal cut was fatal.
We are live at the Delphi courthouse and have just come out of the courtroom after riveting testimony by a psychologist that spent day upon day upon day with Richard Allen. Before I go to the other panelists, let me go back to Susan Hendricks, joining us, investigative reporter and author of Down the Hill, My Descent into the Double Murder in Delphi. So many confessions. I don't, what else will it take, Susan Hendricks? He's given over 60 confessions. He's remorseful. He got tearful in some of them. And one of them, he says, I wanted to, quote, go back and change what he did. He took comfort in religion. He says over and over, I killed Abby and Libby. My wife won't believe me. I want closure by signing my confession. But what I'm looking for is specific detail, because a confession that is rich in detail or a statement rich in detail is more believable. He explains he wanted to the girls, but then did not. He goes on to describe putting branches over them, says he had a gun. He goes on with information, for instance, that he saw a man and that cut into what he wanted to do. The psychologist said he appeared relieved after he gave the confession. She also said that she believed he was feigning in order to manipulate people. The odd behavior, such as drinking toilet water, his behavior with his own feces, none of that happened till he confessed to his wife, and she called the lawyer, and the lawyer met with him. So what are the other details that he revealed in his confessions to the psychologist, Susan Hendricks?
Yeah, and today was it, Nancy. We heard it together, telling that step by step of what he did. He admits to following the girls on the bridge, having a gun, ordering them down the hill, being interrupted, as you said. That could either be the owner of the private property down the hill, who has a white van and there's a roadway. Did he hear the white van? Or was it Libby's father, who was supposed to pick them up, Derek, and says that he called for the girls? Is that what interrupted them? But giving a detail by detail account of what he did, and you're right, his wife hanging up, calling the attorneys, and that is where the defense is going to go, saying he was in a maximum security prison, he shouldn't have been there, wasn't convicted, and that place drove him to this psychosis. But again, confessing over and over, saying he wanted to start World War III at one point.
He never complained about his treatment to the psychologist, even when, remember they kept asking in court, what did he list as his complaints? He never complained about his treatment. And isn't it true, Susan Hendricks, that in his confession to the psychologist, he said he had a gun? Nobody knew that for the longest time. Remember, we were speculating about the COD, cause of death? No one knew there was a gun except the killer. And here he is telling all to the psychologist.
Absolutely. And law enforcement was criticized, Nancy, for years for not telling us or giving us more information. And what if, because they did have that bullet, that they said there was a gun. He admits to the gun. Now we have him there. They were words that we wanted to hear from the killer. I believe he is the killer. I believe this is what everyone needed to hear, wanted to hear. And Nancy, you know it's so windy outside of the courthouse. I know you're feeling it too. But we were inside and everyone was listening very closely to what this doctor had to say. Why? Because she was speaking for Richard Allen. What he said to her, even claiming, remember this, Nancy, a sex addiction.
We are live at the Delphi Courthouse bringing you the latest testimony pouring from the witness stand. Susan Hendricks, I just want to go over another thing I heard in the courtroom. I heard in one of the confessions Alan gave, he said, I made sure they were dead because I didn't want them to, and then it faded out. I couldn't hear what the witness was saying. I didn't want them to what? Tell anybody? I made sure they were dead because I didn't want them to what?
Suffer. He didn't want them to suffer.
How kind of him. He also said, the shrink also said he did not indicate anyone helped him. He again reiterates this was all about sex and that he thought the girls could have been as young as 11. Okay, he then points out other people he saw in the vicinity. They're all children. He's staking out the bridge, looking at children. He saw 3 other people, he says. Joining me right now is Dr. Mark Mirabello. He is the author of The Odin Brotherhood at markmirabello.com. Mark, thank you for being with us. We heard that the defendant revealed he laid branches across the girl's body. That happens all the time when murders occur outdoors. The killer, for whatever psychological reason, tries to cover up their body with branches or leaves. What could that possibly have to do with Odinism, Mark?
you can have a ritual without sacrifice, but you cannot have sacrifice without ritual. And to just lay a few branches on someone and to carve some kind of symbol on a tree, this does not qualify as a ritual sacrifice. Ritual sacrifices are really elaborate and can take a great period of time. So now regarding how various defense witnesses have claimed that they see significance in the way the crime scene was arranged, that reminds me of how some people can see messages in alphabet soup. There really isn't one there, but they see it with the letters.
Okay, now wait, hold on just a moment. Dr. Mark Mirabello, I'm starting to understand what you are talking about when you say people reading messages in their alphabet soup, because that's spinning way out there. Putting branches over two bodies, in my mind, does not equal Odinism. But that is what the defense is going to try and argue. Guys, Dr. Mirabello is the author of the Odin Brotherhood. Cheryl McCollum and Susan Hendricks, I want to talk to you very quickly before we have to go back into the courtroom about the audio portion of the bridge guy. Susan Hendricks, isn't it true that when the full portion of the audio is played, we hear a lot more? There is mention of a gun. Only the killer and the two girls would have known that. What else did you hear on the audio, Susan Hendricks?
Initially, I thought they sound so young, and that was heart-wrenching, of course, hearing the girls' voices. But you did hear Abby say, "Hey, don't leave me up here," because she was a couple steps back from Libby. Then you hear Libby say, "We got to go down this way." Then you hear, "That's a gun," or something to that effect, and you hear a click. And then you hear guys and hi, like a scared hi, and then down the hill. It was hard to listen to.
Cheryl McCollum, that has been your assertion since day one when this video emerged, that the perp, the bridge guy, who happens to be wearing the very same clothes as Richard Allen, who places himself at the location of the crime scene at the time of the crime, all along you said you thought he had a gun stuffed in his pocket, that was what he's holding.
Absolutely. And Leggett testified that he, as a police officer, could hear that gun racking. And, I also think they found another unspent cartridge in his memory box in his bedroom. Could that be the one that he picked up? Because Nancy, again, to your point, he puts himself there, date, time. He's on video. You hear that voice. And some people have already said from the tapes they've heard, it sounds like Bridge Guy. He parked way away from the bridge. He had the ejected cartridge that was unspent that matched his weapon. He stopped on a warm day to get a jacket. None of this makes sense.
And let me tell you, this is just day one of the beginning of his confessions, and already admitting to the branches, the gun, the intent to rape, and so much more that only the killer would know. We wait as justice unfolds. Thank you for joining us here on Crime Stories, out in front of the Delphi courthouse, as testimony resumes. Goodbye, friend. Please join us on our mission to find missing people, especially children, to solve unsolved homicides. If you're on the go, catch us on your favorite podcast app, where you can get all of our content, where we, in our own way, seek justice.